I think that Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers are being severely overlooked this year because of Dabo's stubbornness to utilize the portal. I get that in today's age of college football, utilizing the transfer portal nearly is seen as a must if you want to be a championship team. But I'm not ready to write off Clemson just yet because Dabo seems to be stuck in his ways, because we don't know if Dabo's way is still a winning way to being a championship contender still. When you recruit at the level that Clemson does, which is still pretty much at a top 5, top 10 level, you really don't need to go into the portal unless it's for 2 or 3 guys to fill some holes that you have at certain positions that you can find immediate fixes for right away. But Dabo Swinney has always been about player development. And Clemson still does a really good job of getting players drafted high at the next level. They just had a cornerback who got drafted in the first round by the Baltimore Ravens, and they had a couple of defensive linemen that got drafted in the later rounds also. So Clemson still is really good at development and getting guys ready for the next level. I think that the problem with Clemson hasn't just been their lack of use in the transfer portal. I really think it's been their lack of production on offense, which I think that's going to change this year because you got Garrett Riley going into year 2. And raise your hand if you knew that Garrett Riley was Lincoln Riley's brother. Like, I did not know that until a few months ago. I knew the name sounded familiar. Garrett Riley, like, is he really related to Lincoln Riley? I went to the Google search. I was like, oh, shit. Lincoln Riley has a brother? Okay, so if you're Lincoln Riley's brother, I would expect for this offense to get going sooner rather than later. And with what they have at wide receiver this year, I really believe that Clemson's offense is going to be back. At one point, Clemson had a run where they weren't up there with Ohio State and LSU for being wide receiver U, but they did have a nice little run where they were consistently pumping out NFL level wide receivers, from your Sammy Watkins to your Mike Williams of the world, your DeAndre Hopkins. I think the last good NFL wide receiver they had was Justin Ross, and he went undrafted. Well, you got a lot of good wide receivers coming into this season. Not only do you have a lot of experience coming back at that position, but you got some really promising true freshmen who could step up. You're always good at running back. Phil Maffa is going to be replacing Will Shipley. I don't really expect a big drop-off there. Your offensive line should be really good. You hired Matt Luke from Georgia. He's one of the better offensive line coaches in America. Cade Klubnik, if he can step up his play and he improves this year, this is going to be a really good offense. The weapons are there at wide receiver. The offensive line play hopefully should end up playing good. I mean, I could see Clemson's offense being the best that they've been since they last went to the national championship with Trevor Lawrence. And the reason for why this offense has been so inconsistent over the last couple of years has been because you've had poor play calling mixed in with the issues on the offensive line and not really having good receivers. Well, now a lot of those issues should be gone this year. And we already know defensively, Clemson always has a good defense. And this year, they're stacked everywhere. They got a lot of NFL guys on the D-line and the back end of that secondary. The key games for Clemson this year are going to be week 1 against Georgia. I'm not expecting you to beat Georgia, but I at least want to see you be competitive against Georgia, because if you get blown out by Georgia, I don't know if I can still consider you to be an elite program anymore. I'm not used to seeing Clemson get dragged by the best teams in college football. I know that they got embarrassed last year against Duke, and that definitely was an embarrassing loss, but let's not forget that they almost beat Florida State last year. If it wasn't for that missed field goal that they had late in that game, they would have won that game. We seem to forget about that. NC State, that's going to be a challenging one because NC State is viewed as a dark horse contender in the ACC this year. You got to play Florida State on the road. You got Louisville. Virginia Tech could be a tricky game, especially if Virginia Tech is undefeated by that point, which they got a very good chance of being able to be undefeated. You got South Carolina, which you can never overlook. The Beamer boys, especially with what they've done to you in the past. The floor for Clemson is 8-4, which isn't that impressive. But the ceiling for this program is 11-1. For me, I probably would go with them being closer to 11-1 than them being closer to 8-4. I think that this is the best team that Clemson has had in 3 years. They're good at every area. They don't really have any glaring weaknesses. They have concerns. I don't think the offensive line is going to be as bad as what it's been in the past. And I really think that it could end up being a strength for Clemson. Clemson, I'm not going to say that Dabo's reluctantness to use the portal is going to be the reason for the demise. Okay, because it's not like Georgia and Alabama are fully assembling their squads from the portal. What they do is they get a couple of guys here and there that want to come play for them. And if they're good enough, they say, okay, you can come play for us. Like Jahmyr Gibbs reached out to play for Alabama. You know, I'm pretty sure the players that are transferring to Georgia, Georgia may not be reaching out to them. They may be reaching out to Georgia because Georgia doesn't have to reach out to nobody. This is Georgia. They recruit better than anybody else. They always have 5 and 4 stars at every position. So when one guy transfers, another guy that they recruited can step up and get the job done. For Clemson, I think that's the same thing. I'm not about to write off Dabo Swinney. One thing I've learned about Dabo Swinney is that every time you count him out, he always ends up showing you why you made a mistake doing so. Okay, and I still believe this dude is a fantastic coach. He's a great motivator. His players believe in him. And I like the fact that he still is willing to live and die by his morals. He's not willing to bend his beliefs. And I feel if Clemson ends up having another disappointing season, that Dabo Swinney possibly could retire. He seems like one of those dudes that he'll die before ever having to change his philosophy. And I really think that he's strongly against utilizing the transfer portal, because what people don't understand about the portal is that to get guys out of the portal, you got to cut a few dudes who are on scholarship. And I have a few friends that, you feel me, they've gotten that unfortunate phone call that, hey, like, we don't think we're going to have a spot for you on this year's team. And they've had to hit that portal. And it's a really hard conversation to have, especially when you recruit these guys and you promise their parents that, hey, yeah, your son is going to be in good hands when he comes to Clemson, all to get rid of him. And not only do you keep a guy from playing football, but you also take away a guy's scholarship, and now he has to pay for his education, and now you affect the guy's ability to get a degree, which still could change his life if he's not able to make a career in the NFL. So I agree somewhat with Dabo Swinney's stance on the portal. You know, I don't think the portal is the end-all, be-all, and I'm rooting for Clemson to have success because, you know, I as much as I love the transfer portal, I don't like talking to my friends that play D1 ball, and I'm asking them how they're doing, how their football careers is going. They're like, bro, like, those boys told me I had to hit the portal, fam. You feel me? And this isn't me making up anything. Like, I really got a good amount of homeboys that play college football that have told me verbatim that, you know, their coach told them that they didn't have a spot for them. They took their scholarship away. You feel me? It's really tough in today's college football. What the fans don't understand, and, you know, fans just think that, oh, it's easy to use the portal. No, like, it's some benefits from using the portal, but it's also a detriment, because it kind of makes you a little bit of a villain. And I don't think Dabo Swinney has the heart to be viewed as a villain, which is why I believe that he'd rather retire than to have to change his stance and use the transfer portal. Because I don't think he's willing to cut guys, and I don't think he wants to cut guys. And as a coach, I wouldn't want to do it neither. So for Dabo Swinney, I still believe that Clemson is good enough to be a playoff caliber football team. Could they compete for a national title this year? I wouldn't go that far, but they definitely could win a playoff game or two. I still think that they have one of the best rosters in college football entering this season, at least top 10, because they still recruit really well. Like, look at how good the recruiting class is right now. They're still getting like 5 and 4 star guys, and you got people saying, how the hell is Clemson still getting these dudes? Well, Clemson still is a really good school to go to when it comes to being developed and getting to that next level. So I'm not ready to write off Clemson yet, just because Dabo has some stubbornness to utilizing the transfer portal, because I still believe that he still is really good at developing players and getting them ready for the next level. And I think with the squad that Clemson has entering this year, you got a lot of experience. You're going to have guys like Cade Klubnik that are going into like their third years where they're pretty much seasoned veterans. So you should see more consistent play out of them. And I believe that Clemson is the second best team in the ACC going into this year behind Miami. If there's anybody who should be favored to win this conference, it is Clemson instead of Florida State, because unlike Florida State, Clemson has recruited at a better level than them, and they've been way more consistent at being able to sustain having elite talent on their team without having to get guys from the portal, because not everybody that you get from the portal ends up being a massive upgrade. There are some guys that you get from the portal that you end up whiffing on. So there's no guarantee that you're going to get somebody that can come in and fill a hole from you just because they're coming from the portal. I still think that player development, recruiting guys out of high school and developing them to their peak potential is the key to winning. But you just mix that in somewhat with the transfer portal. But I still believe in Dabo Swinney's ways. I'm not about to question him. I still think that he's one of the better coaches in college football, top 5, top 10. And I'm ready to see what Clemson does this year. I can see them going 10-2.